Everyone laughed at his tire house, but when the earthquake comes, it's the only one left standing. Harold Patterson never imagined his retirement would become a daily battle against mockery and humiliation. At 68, after decades working as a mechanic in the same shop, he had saved every penny to fulfill a seemingly impossible dream. It was when he decided to use the old tires he had been collecting for years to build his own house that it all began. The neighbors in the small fishing neighborhood of Seaside, Oregon, couldn't understand why this stubborn man insisted on stacking used tires as if they were bricks. "Harold, for heaven's sake, you're going to make our street the laughingstock of the whole town," complained Mrs. Dorothy, his neighbor of over 15 years. The old mechanic just smiled and continued his work. Each tire was carefully cleaned, measured, and positioned. He had studied sustainable building techniques at the municipal library for months, noting everything in a worn notebook. He knew exactly what he was doing, even if no one else did. "Dad, this is an embarrassment," Jennifer whispered on the phone, trying to convince her father to stop this madness. "My architecture colleagues are already talking. Photos of your project are circulating on social media. They're calling it Sustainable Slum." Jennifer had lived in Portland for 10 years, where she had built a respected career as an architect. A graduate of the State University of Oregon, she designed luxurious homes for the Oregon elite. The idea that her father was building something she considered a monstrosity left her deeply ashamed. "Daughter, you don't understand," Harold would reply patiently. "This house will be stronger than any of those pretty houses you make." "Stronger how, Dad? Stacked tires aren't a structure. You're spending your entire retirement on this. What if it fails?" Harold would hang up the phone and return to work. Each criticism only motivated him more. Since his wife Margaret had passed away 3 years earlier, he had felt lost, without purpose. Building the house had become his reason to live again. The project was born from a practical necessity. Harold didn't have enough money to buy all the conventional materials. Tires, however, were abundant in the local junkyards. Initially, he thought of using them only for the foundation, but the more he researched, the more convinced he became that they could be the entire structure. "Mr. Harold, are you sure about this?" asked Raymond, owner of the junkyard, where he bought tires for a symbolic price. "I've never seen anyone build a house like this." "Raymond, have you ever seen an earthquake around here?" "An earthquake? Here in the United States?" "Exactly, but they exist. Small ones, but they exist. And when a bigger one comes, my house will be standing." Raymond would shake his head, thinking the old man was getting a bit scatterbrained. But he had liked Harold for years and kept setting aside the best tires for him. The construction progressed slowly. Harold worked alone most of the time, lifting tire after tire with iron determination. His hands, calloused from decades of mechanical work, adapted easily to the new challenge. He had created his own system to position each tire perfectly aligned. The first rows of tires were filled with compacted earth, creating a solid base. Harold had read about this technique on international alternative building websites. Each tire became like a giant brick, heavy and stable. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The neighbors didn't hide their disdain. Children would walk down the street pointing and laughing. Some adults made nasty comments loud enough for him to hear. "There goes the tire nut," Mr. Walter would say, a retiree who spent his days on the porch watching the street activity. "That thing's going to collapse before it's even finished," commented Mrs. Barbara, who lived in the house across the street. "The city should ban that eyesore," murmured Mrs. Doris, who even called the municipal ombudsman to complain about the visual pollution. Harold pretended not to hear, but every word felt like a stab. During lonely nights, sitting in his rocking chair on the porch of the rented house where he still lived, he sometimes doubted himself. Maybe he really was going crazy. Maybe Jennifer was right. But then he remembered the words of Margaret, his late wife. She had always encouraged him to follow his dreams, no matter how crazy they seemed. "Harold, you have the golden touch," she used to say when she saw him fix something impossible in the workshop. "You can make anything work." It was that memory that got him up every morning at 5 a.m. to continue the construction. The mayor of Seaside, Richard Coleman, had received several complaints about the construction. Concerned about the town's tourist image, he sent an inspection team to assess the situation. "Mr. Harold Patterson," said the municipal inspector, a serious young woman named Rebecca, "are you aware that you need a permit to build?" "I have all the documents in order," Harold replied calmly, handing over a folder with papers. "Permit, plans approved by the city, everything's proper." Rebecca examined the documents. Technically, everything was correct. The plans had been approved because, on paper, it looked like a conventional construction. No one had imagined that alternative materials meant used tires. "But is this safe?" she asked, looking suspiciously at the structure that was already 2 meters high. "Safer than many buildings out there," Harold answered with conviction. The inspection found no technical irregularities to halt the work. The tires were being used structurally, filled with approved construction material. Still, Rebecca promised to return with an engineer for a more detailed assessment. Jennifer was furious when she learned about the inspection. "Dad, you're becoming a City Hall case. This is going to end up in the local papers. My professional reputation is going up in smoke." "Daughter, why do you care so much about what others will think?" "Because I work in this field. My professional credibility is at stake. How am I going to explain to my clients that my father builds houses with garbage? It's not garbage, Jennifer. It's repurposed materials, sustainability. Didn't you learn that in college?" The argument ended with Jennifer hanging up angrily. She had decided she wouldn't visit her father until that madness was over. The story of the tire house began to spread through the region. A local news blog published an article with photos titled, "Retiree Builds Bizarre House with Old Tires." The comments were cruel. "They should commit that old man before he does something worse. That's what happens when you have nothing to do in retirement." Imagine the smell of that house in the summer. Harold read everything in silence at the neighborhood internet cafe. Each comment hurt, but it also made him more determined to prove he was right. The municipal engineer, David Anderson, visited the site 2 weeks later. Harold waited anxiously, with all the calculations he had made noted in his notebooks. "Interesting," murmured David, examining the structure. "The tires are creating a flexibility that rigid materials don't have." "Exactly," Harold perked up. "In case of an earthquake, the structure will sway, but it won't break." "An earthquake here?" "The United States does have seismic activity, engineer. Minor, but it exists, and it's increasing over the years." David examined Harold's calculations. To his surprise, the old mechanic had considered factors that many engineers would ignore: structural flexibility, impact absorption, resistance to thermal variations. "Technically, I don't see any major problems," David admitted. "It's unconventional, but it's not dangerous." The municipal engineer's informal technical approval gave Harold more confidence. He intensified his work, waking up even earlier to take advantage of the cool morning time. His son-in-law, Michael, a recently graduated civil engineer and Jennifer's husband, decided to get involved in the situation. He recorded a video at the construction site, ridiculing every aspect of the build. "Folks, look at this," he said to his cell phone camera in a sarcastic tone. "My father-in-law is building a house with tires from a repair shop. This is going to be the first tire house with guaranteed leaks, cracks, and collapse." The video went viral regionally, being shared on WhatsApp groups and social media. Harold was informed by a younger neighbor who used social media. "Mr. Harold, have you seen what your son-in-law posted?" "I have," Harold replied simply, continuing to work. "And you're not going to do anything?" "I'm going to finish my house." Internally, Harold was devastated. The betrayal by his son-in-law hurt more than all the neighbors' jokes combined. He had treated Michael like a son, taught him mechanical techniques, helped the young couple financially at the start of their marriage. That night, Harold called Jennifer. "Honey, did you know about the video your husband made?" Silence on the other end of the line. "Dad, he was angry. You know how he is. He's worried about our professional image. And you agree with him." "Dad, I just want you to stop this. Sell that lot, buy a normal house, live your final years in peace." "Final years? Who said these are my final years?" "Dad, you're almost 70. Harold hung up the phone. His daughter had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. She was wishing for his departure. The construction had become his only companion. Harold talked to the tires as if they were old friends. Each one had a story. Some came from family cars, others from trucks that had traveled the entire country. They all deserved a second chance. One day, while working under the strong midday sun, Harold fainted. Mrs. Dorothy, the neighbor who complained the most about the construction, was the one who helped him. "Harold, Harold, wake up!" she shouted, sprinkling water on his face. I'm fine," he murmured, regaining consciousness. "Fine, nothing. You're dehydrated, sunburned. This can't go on like this." For the first time, Harold saw genuine concern in someone's eyes. Mrs. Dorothy took him to her house, offered water and food, cared for him as if he were family. "Why don't you hire someone to help?" she asked, as Harold regained his strength. "I don't have money to pay for labor. Every penny of my retirement is going into the construction." "And if it fails?" "It won't fail," said Harold with a conviction he himself didn't know where it came from. Mrs. Dorothy watched him for a moment. There was something in that man's determination that was beginning to awaken her respect. "You know what, Harold? I think you're crazy, but you're a brave, crazy person." It was the first compliment he had received in months. From that day on, Mrs. Dorothy began to observe the construction with different eyes. She noticed the precision with which Harold positioned each tire, the careful way he calculated angles and measurements. This was not the work of a madman. It was the work of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Coin Portland sent a crew to do a story on the crazy house. The reporter, Brian Thompson, arrived with cameras and a mocking attitude that was evident from the first moment. "We're here in Seaside, where a retiree decided to build his house with old tires," he said to the camera with an ironic smile. "Let's talk to the author of this, let's say, unique architectural creation." Harold was working when the crew arrived. He stopped what he was doing and walked to the gate, wiping his hands, dirty with soil, on his pants. "Are you Harold Patterson?" "I am." "Can you tell us why you decided to build a house with tires?" "Because it's strong, sustainable, and cheap," Harold replied simply. "But don't you think it looks, let's say, aesthetically questionable?" Harold looked at the reporter for a moment, weighing his words. "Son, I'm not building to win a beauty contest. I'm building to have a safe place to live." "Safe? Are you sure this structure is safe?" "Safer than a lot of houses out there. These tires absorb impact, they don't crack with heat, they don't rust with rain. They're practically indestructible." The reporter insisted on angles that ridiculed the construction. He asked Harold to explain technical details, clearly expecting the old man to contradict himself or talk nonsense. But Harold surprised everyone with solid knowledge of structural engineering. "Did you study engineering?" "No. But I studied a lot before starting this. I went to the library, researched on the internet, talked with engineers. I didn't start this on a whim." When the story aired, it had a very different tone than the reporter had initially intended. Although it still maintained an air of skepticism, it was impossible to ignore that Harold knew what he was doing. The comments online were divided. Some still ridiculed it, but others began to show curiosity and even admiration for the initiative. "This man knows more than a lot of engineers out there. At least he's trying something different. Sustainability really is the future." Jennifer watched the report in her apartment in Portland. For the first time, she saw her father not as a stubborn old man, but as an intelligent and determined man. Still, wounded pride kept her from admitting that she might have been wrong. The construction continued to advance. Harold had developed a strict routine: wake up at 5, work until noon, rest in the shade during the hottest hours, return to work in the late afternoon. On weekends, he worked all day, taking the opportunity to do the heaviest parts. The house was beginning to take shape. The tire walls were 5 feet high and still rising. Harold had planned windows and doors, leaving the necessary spaces during construction. Every detail had been thought out in advance. One day he received an unexpected visit. A well-dressed man, about 40 years old, approached the construction site. "Mr. Harold, My name is Kenneth Morrison. I'm a representative for Coastal Elite Builders. Yes? We are interested in acquiring your lot. We can make a very advantageous deal for you. Harold stopped working and paid attention. It's not for sale. You haven't even heard my offer. I don't need to hear. It's not for sale. Mr. Harold, let's be realistic. What you're building here has no commercial value whatsoever. We're offering triple the market value for your land. You could buy a nice house anywhere in the city. I said it's not for sale. Kenneth insisted for a few more minutes, progressively increasing the offer. When he realized he wouldn't be able to convince Harold, his attitude changed. Mr. Harold, you're being very stubborn. This region is developing rapidly. It would be a shame if your inadequate construction hindered the appreciation of the neighborhood. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. Harold approached Kenneth, looking directly into his eyes. Son, I've worked with iron and steel for 50 years. I know how to tell good metal from bad, and I know how to tell a good person from a bad one too. Now get off my property. Kenneth left, but his words kept echoing in Harold's head. Could it be that there were larger interests behind all the hostility he was facing? In the following days, Harold noticed strange movements. Unknown cars drove slowly down the street, photographing his construction. People with clipboards measured distances and took notes. When he approached to ask what they were doing, they quickly left. Mr. Harold, said Mrs. Dorothy one afternoon, there are strange people lurking around here. Yesterday I saw 2 men in suits measuring your land. I don't know, Mrs. Dorothy, but I won't be intimidated. Do you think it could be something from the city? It could be from anyone. My documents are all in order. But internally, Harold began to worry. He didn't have the resources to face a complex legal battle. If powerful real estate interests were targeting his property, he would be at a disadvantage. One night, he was awakened by strange noises coming from the property. He grabbed a flashlight and went to investigate. He found 3 men tampering with his construction. They had knocked down some tires from the top row and scattered trash around the site. "What are you doing here?" shouted Harold. The men ran to a waiting car and sped away. Harold spent the rest of the night reorganizing the damaged tires and cleaning up the mess. It was clear that someone wanted to sabotage him, but he didn't know exactly who or why. The next morning he filed a complaint at the local police station. "Mr. Harold, did you see the faces of these men? Can you describe them?" asked the clerk. "It was dark. I only saw shadows, but I'm sure it was sabotage. Without witnesses or evidence, it's hard to open an investigation. Don't you have security cameras?" "I don't have money for that." "Then it would be good for you to be careful. Maybe hire a private security guard." Harold left the station frustrated. It was obvious he wouldn't have official support. He was alone against forces he couldn't even fully identify. That afternoon, while working, he received another visit. This time, it was an older man, about 60, who looked like he understood construction. "Mr. Harold, my name is George Henderson. I'm a retired civil engineer. I live up the street." "What can I do for you, Mr. Walter?" "I've been watching your project for a few weeks. I confess that initially I thought it was amateur work. But yesterday I stopped to observe more closely and I was impressed." Harold stopped working and gave his full attention to the visitor. "Impressed how?" "The technique you're using, this compaction of the tires with soil, the weight distribution, the support angles, this isn't improvisation. You really studied before starting." "Yes, I did, a lot." "May I ask a question? Why tires? What was the inspiration?" Harold sat on one of the tires that served as an improvised bench and invited George to do the same. "My wife, Margaret, had passed away 3 years earlier. I was feeling lost, not knowing what to do with my life. Then one day, going through her things, I found a magazine article she had saved. It talked about sustainable houses all over the world. There was a photo of a house made with tires in Japan that had withstood an earthquake. And you thought you could do the same here?" "I thought I could do better. I spent months studying, calculating, planning. Margaret always said I had the Midas touch. I wanted to prove she was right." George fell silent for a moment, observing the construction. "Mr. Harold, I would like to offer my help, free of charge. This project has the potential to be something truly special." "Your help how?" "I can review your structural calculations, suggest technical improvements, help with ventilation and waterproofing issues. I have 40 years of experience in construction." For the first time in months, Harold felt he wasn't completely alone. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's beautiful to see someone following a dream with such determination. And because, professionally speaking, I'm curious to see how this will work in practice." The partnership with George changed everything. The retired engineer showed up every morning with coffee and ideas. They spent hours discussing technical details, improving Harold's original design. "Harold, did you consider the seismic issue when you designed this?" "Yes, I did. It's one of the main advantages of the tires. They absorb vibration." "Exactly. And you know what? I was researching online yesterday. Seismic activity in the United States is increasing. Small tremors, but it's increasing." "Really? Really? And when a bigger earthquake happens, conventional houses will suffer. Yours has the potential to come out unscathed." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. With George's help, the construction gained speed and technical quality. They installed a natural ventilation system that used the spaces between the tires to create air currents. The house became naturally cooler than conventional constructions. "This is going to save a fortune on electricity," commented George. "The air circulates naturally, keeps the temperature pleasant without needing air conditioning." "I hadn't thought of that." "Exactly. Sustainability isn't just reusing material, it's saving energy too." The news of the partnership between Harold and George spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some neighbors began to view the construction with more respect. If an experienced engineer was involved, maybe it wasn't so crazy after all. But not everyone was pleased with this development. Kenneth, the representative from the construction company, returned with a different proposal. "Mr. Harold, my company would like to partner with you." "What kind of partnership?" "We want to document your construction technique, patent it, and use it commercially. You would be a minority partner and receive royalties." "And what would happen to my house?" "Oh, it would be demolished, so we can build a model development using the perfected technique." "Demolished, of course." This primitive version isn't suitable as a commercial model. We would need something more presentable." Harold looked at Kenneth with a mixture of anger and pity. "Son, you haven't understood a thing. This is not a commercial project. It's my home. It's the place where I'll live until my last breath. Mr. Harold, be reasonable. This house will never have commercial value. It's ugly, strange, devalues the area. Our offer is generous. Get off my property and don't come back." Kenneth left angrily, but Harold noticed he had written something down in a notebook before leaving. That was not a good sign. That same week, Harold received a notification from the City Hall. Someone had filed a complaint alleging that his construction violated municipal codes and represented a risk to the neighborhood. "George, can you take a look at this?" asked Harold, showing him the papers. The engineer read carefully. "It's a generic complaint, without specifying exactly which law you would be violating. Clearly made by someone who wants to cause trouble, not by someone with legitimate concerns. What do I do?" "We've prepared a detailed technical defense. I will draft a complete report on the structural safety of the construction. With my professional signature, it will be hard to question." George worked for days preparing the document. He measured, calculated, photographed, documented every aspect of the construction. The final report was 20 pages long and unequivocally demonstrated that the tire house was not only safe, but in many aspects surpassed conventional constructions. When they submitted the report at the City Hall, the clerk was impressed with the level of technical detail. "I've never seen such complete documentation for a residential house," she commented. "That's because it's not a common house," replied George with pride. The complaint was dismissed, but Harold knew his problems were far from over. Whoever it was wouldn't give up easily. The construction was almost finished. The walls were 2.5 meters high, the windows were installed, and the roof was being prepared. Harold had opted for a conventional tile roof, but with a reinforced structure to withstand strong winds. "You know, Harold," said George while they worked on the roof, "this house of yours could revolutionize construction in the Northeast. Resistant to heat, windstorms, cheap, sustainable. It's brilliant." "I don't want to revolutionize anything. I just want a place to call my own." "But you see the potential, right? Imagine how many poor families could own a home using this technique." Harold stopped working and looked at the nearly finished construction. Truly, he hadn't thought about the broader implications of his project. "Do you think it would work for other people?" "I'm sure, and you could teach. And you could. Set up courses, write manuals. George, I just want to live in peace." "I know, but sometimes life gives us opportunities to make a difference, even when we're not looking for them." That night, Harold kept thinking about George's words. Perhaps his struggle wasn't just personal. Perhaps there was something bigger at stake. Jennifer decided to pay her father a surprise visit. They hadn't spoken in weeks, and she was starting to feel guilty about the distance. Michael had tried to dissuade her, but she insisted. When she arrived at the lot, she was shocked by what she saw. The house was almost ready and was completely different from what she had imagined. The tires, partially covered by vegetation that Harold had planted, created a unique and even beautiful look. The structure seemed solid and well built. "Dad?" Harold turned and saw his daughter for the first time in months. Emotion and anger mixed in his chest. "Jennifer, Dad, this is incredible. It's nothing like I imagined. You thought it would be a shack." I didn't know what to think. I'm sorry for not believing you." They hugged, a tentative but sincere reconciliation. "Who is this gentleman?" asked Jennifer, seeing George working on the roof. "George Henderson, retired engineer. He's been helping me these last few months." Jennifer talked with George and was even more impressed when he explained the technical aspects of the construction. As an architect, she recognized the sophistication of the project. "Dad, you really created something special here. Now you believe me?" "I do, and I'm sorry for doubting." But the reconciliation was interrupted when Michael arrived at the site. He had followed Jennifer, worried about what she might promise her father-in-law. "Jennifer, what are you doing here?" "Michael, you need to see this. The house is beautiful. It's super well built." "Jennifer, this is still an aberration. The fact that it's almost finished doesn't change anything." Harold approached his son-in-law. "Michael, you're an engineer. At least take a technical look before judging." "I don't need to look. I know it's a hack job, and I know it's messing with our professional life." "Our professional life?" asked Jennifer. "Yes, of course. Do you think nobody knows you're the daughter of the tire nut?" Some clients have already made comments. Jennifer felt torn between supporting her father and protecting her career. Maybe it would be better if you didn't give any more interviews, Dad, to let things calm down." Harold felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. Even when Jennifer seemed to understand his project, she was still ashamed of him. "All right, daughter, I won't speak to any more journalists." George watched the whole scene in silence, feeling sorry for his friend. After Jennifer and Michael left, Harold was dejected. "George, am I being selfish? Am I hurting my daughter's life with this stubbornness?" "Harold, you're following an honest and legitimate dream. If your daughter is ashamed of it, that's not your problem. But she's all the family I have left. And you're all the father she has. She should support you, not ask you to hide." Harold spent the next night reflecting. Maybe it was time to give up, sell the lot, buy a normal house, live out his remaining years quietly. But when dawn came and he saw his construction nearly complete, his determination returned. That house represented more than bricks and cement. It was proof that he was still capable of dreaming and achieving. The construction company intensified the pressure. Kenneth began showing up weekly with ever higher offers. When that didn't work, they changed their strategy. They started spreading rumors that the tire house was devaluing all the properties in the area. Some neighbors who had initially gotten used to the construction started criticizing it again. "Harold, the real estate agent said my house lost value because of yours." complained Mrs. Barbara. "If I go to sell, I'll take a loss." "Mrs. Barbara, are you sure that's true? Or did someone tell you that?" "It was the Coastal Elite Builders agent who said it. He was appraising houses here on the street." Harold realized the disinformation campaign was working. Kenneth was convincing the neighbors that his house was a problem for everyone. One afternoon, a group of teenagers passed by the street and started throwing stones at the construction. Some tires were damaged and a window cracked. "Hey, stop that!" shouted Harold. "Ugly house, you crazy old man," they shouted as they ran. Harold noticed one of the boys was the son of a neighbor who had recently complained about the devaluation. That night, he met Mrs. Dorothy on the street. "Mrs. Dorothy, did you see who sent the boys to stone my house?" "I did, Harold. But I can't say. These people have money, power. They could harm me too." "Which people?" "Harold, you've messed with big players. This construction company that's been circling here is no joke. They want that lot, and they'll get it one way or another." Harold understood he was facing a much bigger battle than he initially imagined. The next morning, a dump truck arrived and dumped a load of trash at the entrance to his lot. Harold spent the entire day cleaning up the mess. "George, I think it's time to accept that I've lost this battle." "Harold, you're 2 weeks away from finishing the house. You can't give up now." "But how long do I have to endure this harassment?" "Until you prove they're wrong." "And how will I prove it?" George was thoughtful for a moment. "You know something? I have a feeling you won't need to prove anything. Life will prove it for you." "What kind of feeling?" "Harold, I've worked with structures for 40 years. I know when a construction is good. Yours isn't just good, it's exceptional. And do you know what kind of situation it was optimized for? For what? For extreme situations. Earthquakes, windstorms, impacts. Normal constructions are made for normal situations. Yours was made for abnormal situations." "So what?" "So what? If an abnormal situation happens eventually, and when it does, everyone will see who was right." Harold wasn't sure if he believed in George's premonition, but he decided to continue. Only a few finishing touches were left for the house to be completely ready. They spent the next few days finalizing details: electrical wiring, plumbing, painting the trim, planting more vegetation to cover the external tires. The final result was a unique yet harmonious house. "Harold, it turned out beautiful," said George on the day they laid the last roof tile. "Thank you, my friend. I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. Maybe it would have taken longer, but you could have." Harold planned to move in the following week. He had sold most of the furniture from his rented house, bought some new basic items, and was eager to finally live in his own home. The night before the move, he received a phone call from Jennifer. "Dad, I've thought more about our conversation. I want to support you. Michael can deal with his wounded pride." "Are you sure, honey?" "I am. You're my father, and what you built is amazing. I'm going to post pictures of the house on my professional social media. Let anyone who wants to criticize go ahead and do it. Jennifer, and Dad, I'm sorry for everything. You deserve to have a daughter who is proud of her father." Harold slept happily that night. Finally, after months of loneliness and struggle, he had his daughter back. The move happened on a sunny Saturday morning. George helped carry Harold's few belongings to the new house. Mrs. Dorothy brought a cornmeal cake as a housewarming gift. "Harold, now that you've succeeded, tell me, was all this suffering worth it?" "Mrs. Dorothy, every dream costs something. Mine cost tears, sweat, and a few friendships, but every tear was worth it. And if something goes wrong with the house?" "It won't. And if it does, I'll fix it. I've learned I'm capable of fixing anything." The first night in the new house was magical. Harold ate dinner alone, but he didn't feel lonely. Every tire, every detail, carried memories of the months of construction. It was more than a house. It was the materialization of his determination. The indoor temperature was perfect, despite the intense heat outside. The natural ventilation system worked exactly as George had predicted. It was quieter than in the rented house, as if the tires also absorbed outside noise. Harold sat on the makeshift porch and watched the stars. For the first time in years, he felt completely at peace. The next morning, Sunday, he woke up to the sound of birds singing in the trees he had planted around the house. It was a sound he hadn't heard in a long time in the city. "Good morning, house," he said, smiling. He spent the day organizing the final details, hanging pictures on the walls, tidying the yard. Every small task was a pleasure, because now he was taking care of something that was truly his. In the middle of the afternoon, George stopped by for a visit. "So, Harold, how was the first night?" "Perfect. The house is more comfortable than I expected." "I knew it. Tires are excellent thermal and acoustic insulation." They sat on the porch and talked about future plans. Harold was thinking of planting a small vegetable garden, maybe raising a few chickens. George suggested improvements that could be made over time. "George, I wanted to ask you something. Why did you help me in the beginning when everyone thought I was crazy?" "You know, Harold, I spent 40 years building the same houses for rich people. Always the same thing, conventional structure, luxurious finishes, material waste. When I saw you doing something different with purpose, it reminded me of why I chose to be an engineer. I wanted to build things that made a difference. And do you think my house makes a difference?" "I'm sure it does. You've proven it's possible to build with quality while spending little, reusing materials, respecting the environment. That's revolutionary." Harold Patterson grew thoughtful. Perhaps there really was something bigger at play here. The following weeks were peaceful. Harold developed a routine, waking up early, tending to the garden he had planted, making small repairs and improvements to the house, reading on the porch in the afternoon, preparing simple dinners. The house proved its efficiency daily. On days of extreme heat, it remained cool. When it rained heavily for 3 days straight, there wasn't a single leak. During a gale that knocked down trees in the city, it didn't budge an inch. "Harold," said George after the storm, "your house passed the test. It withstood everything nature threw at it. For now." "Why do you say for now?" "Because I have a feeling the real test is still to come." George looked at him, intrigued. "What kind of feeling?" "I can't explain it. But ever since I moved here, I've been dreaming about earthquakes. Very vivid dreams, like a premonition. Harold, earthquakes in the United States are extremely rare. Rare, but not impossible. And you yourself said seismic activity is increasing." "That's true, but still, George, I built this house to withstand the impossible. I have a feeling I'm going to need that resilience sooner than we think." George became worried about Harold's mental state. Perhaps all the pressure of the last few months was causing anxiety and obsessions. "Harold, are you sleeping well? Aren't you feeling too anxious?" "I'm sleeping great. And I'm not anxious, I'm prepared." "As if I know something is going to happen. Prepared for what?" "To prove I was right all along." The following week, Jennifer visited her father. She brought Michael, who reluctantly agreed to see the finished house. "Dad, it's incredible!" exclaimed Jennifer upon entering the house. "The indoor atmosphere is so pleasant. The layout of the rooms is perfect." "Yeah, it's actually livable," admitted Michael, though still hesitant. "Livable?" laughed Harold. "My son, this house is more resilient than any building you've ever built." "Resilient to what?" "To anything nature decides to send its way." Michael examined some technical aspects of the construction. As an engineer, he couldn't help but admire the solidity of the structure, though he wouldn't admit it out loud. "Dad," said Jennifer during lunch, "have you thought about writing about your experience? A book, a technical manual?" "What for?" "To teach other people. Imagine how many families could benefit from this technique." "George already suggested that, but I don't know how to write a book." "I can help. I can document the whole process, do the technical drawings, photograph construction details." "You would do that?" "Of course, I'm proud of your project. I want everyone to know." Harold was moved by his daughter's change of attitude. From an adversary, she had become an ally and admirer. "Michael, what do you think?" Jennifer asked her husband. I think it could be interesting from an academic standpoint," he replied, trying to sound neutral. It was a start. Harold knew winning over his son-in-law completely would take more time, but at least he was no longer being hostile. After lunch, they sat on the porch to talk. Harold shared details of the construction, the difficulties faced, the small daily victories. The hardest part wasn't the technical side, he explained. It was dealing with people's judgment. There were moments I thought about giving up. Why didn't you give up? Asked Michael. Because Margaret, my wife, always told me I had the golden touch, that I could make anything work. I couldn't prove her wrong. And now? Do you feel like you've proven she was right? Not yet. I think the final proof is still to come. What proof? Harold looked up at the sky, as if searching for signs. I don't know, but I feel it's going to be big. That night, after Jennifer and Michael had left, Harold dreamed of earthquakes again. In the dream, he saw houses collapsing all around, while his remained standing firm. The people who had doubted him came asking for shelter. He woke up sweating, but strangely calm. Margaret, he said to the ceiling as if his late wife were listening, I think you're trying to tell me something through these dreams. The following days were normal. Harold continued his routine, received a few visits from curious people who had heard about the tire house, gave some interviews to local blogs about sustainability. A seismic research institute at the State University of Oregon published a report warning of small tremors detected in the region. It was a technical thing which went unnoticed by most people. George brought the report to Harold. Look at this. They detected micro-earthquakes in the coastal region of Oregon, including near Seaside here. Didn't I tell you? Harold, they're almost imperceptible tremors. It doesn't mean there's going to be a big earthquake. But it means there is seismic activity. Yes, but... George, let me tell you something. Ever since I moved here, I've dreamed of earthquakes every night. Very real dreams. Harold, you're obsessed with this earthquake idea. Maybe it would be good to talk to someone. I'm not obsessed. I'm prepared. George grew even more concerned about his friend's mental state, but decided not to press the issue. 2 weeks later, the Institute published a new report. The seismic activity had increased. The tremors were still imperceptible to the public, but they were becoming more frequent. Harold, did you see? Said George, arriving agitated with the local newspaper that had published a small note about the report. I saw. So what? What do you mean, so what? You were right about the seismic activity. I know I was right. Now the question is, when will the big one happen? Harold, even if a larger earthquake happens, it could take years, decades. It could, but I feel it will be soon. That night, Harold's dream was different. He saw a calendar, and a date was marked in red. August 15th. He woke up and looked at the wall calendar. 2 weeks remained until August 15th. Harold spent the following days preparing. He bought bottled water, canned food, a battery-powered flashlight, a portable radio. He checked all the structures of the house, reinforced some fittings. George, can you do me a favor? Of course. Can you stay here with me on August 15th? Why specifically that day? It's the day it will happen. George thought Harold was becoming paranoid, but agreed to keep his friend company. On the morning of August 15th, Harold woke up at 5 a.m. He felt different, as if the air were charged with electricity. Today is the day, he murmured to himself. He spent the morning organizing everything in the house as if preparing for an important event. George arrived in the mid-afternoon, finding Harold strangely calm. So, Harold, are you feeling okay? I'm great, prepared. Prepared for what? You'll see. They spent the afternoon talking on the porch, Harold seeming more relaxed than he had been in weeks. George began to think that perhaps nothing would happen, and Harold's obsession was just anxiety. At 7 in the evening, they were having dinner when Harold suddenly stopped eating. George, did you feel that? Feel what? The house shook. I didn't feel anything. It was very subtle, but it shook. 5 minutes later, there was another shake, more noticeable. Now I felt it, said George, alarmed. It's just the beginning. The tires in the house's structure began to absorb small vibrations coming from the ground. It was as if the house was preparing for something bigger. At 8 in the evening, a stronger tremor made the window panes vibrate. Harold and George went out to the porch and saw that the neighbors had also noticed. Harold, is this really an earthquake? Yes, and it's going to get worse. At 8:30, a more intense shock caused some houses in the neighborhood to crack. Screams began to be heard in the street. The tire house swayed gently but suffered no damage. "My God, Harold, your house is behaving exactly as you predicted." "I knew it. How did you know?" "Margaret told me in my dreams." The main earthquake happened at 9:15 at night. Magnitude 6.2 on the Richter scale, the largest ever recorded in the United States. The conventional houses around suffered serious damage: cracks, broken windows, collapsed walls, fallen roof tiles. Harold's house swayed like a boat on calm waters, absorbing all the seismic energy through the flexible tires. Not a single glass fell from the shelves. "Harold! George!" shouted Mrs. Dorothy, banging on the door. "Please, let us in. Our house is cracked all over." Harold opened the door and found not only Mrs. Dorothy, but several other families from the neighborhood. All the conventional houses had suffered damage. The only completely intact structure was the tire house. "Come in, everyone come in," said Harold. "Harold, how did you know this was going to happen?" asked his neighbor, Mr. Walter, who had always ridiculed the construction. "I knew my house was made for this." Throughout the night, the tire house served as shelter for 23 people. Whole families who had mocked Harold now depended on the structure they had called an aberration. "Mr. Harold," said Mrs. Barbara, crying, "I'm sorry for everything I said about your house. You were right all along." "No need to apologize, Mrs. Barbara. What matters is that everyone is safe." The next morning, when the sun rose over a seaside devastated by the tremors, the tire house stood majestic and intact amidst the rubble. It was the only building in the area that had suffered absolutely no damage. "Harold," said George, looking out the window, "you made history." "No, George. I just built a house. A house that saved lives." Reporters from all over the country arrived to document the miracle of the tire house. Harold gave interviews explaining his technique, but always with humility. "I didn't invent anything," he would say to the cameras. "I just studied, planned, and executed carefully." "But how did you predict there would be an earthquake?" "I didn't predict it. I just prepared for the possibility." Jennifer arrived from Portland the next day, desperate to know if her father was okay. When she saw the house intact amidst the devastation, she began to cry. "Dad, you saved everyone." "I didn't save anyone. My house saved them." It's the same thing. Universities from all over the world sent researchers to study Harold's construction technique. Japanese engineers, earthquake experts, were impressed with the efficiency of the tire structure. "Mr. Harold," said Professor Watanabe from the University of Tokyo, "your technique is revolutionary. In Japan, we spend millions on anti-seismic technology. You achieved the same result with used tires." "Professor, the secret isn't in the material, it's in understanding how the forces work." The construction company that had pressured Harold to sell the land completely changed its attitude. Kenneth appeared the day after the earthquake with a partnership proposal. "Mr. Harold, we would like to license your technique for commercial buildings." "It's not for sale." "But Mr. Harold, think of the commercial potential." "I said it's not for sale." "Then what do you intend to do with this discovery?" "Teaching, for free." Harold announced he would give free tire construction courses for low-income families. The city provided a plot of land for the practical classes. "Dad, are you sure?" asked Jennifer. "You could make a lot of money from this." "Daughter, I didn't build this house to make money. I built it to prove it was possible. Now I want other people to have the same opportunity." Michael, who had documented all the structural damage to the other houses during the earthquake, finally admitted he was wrong about his father-in-law. "Mr. Harold, I'm sorry for everything I said. You're a genius." "I'm not a genius, son. I'm just a stubborn old man who didn't give up on a dream." In the following months, dozens of tire houses began to be built in Seaside and neighboring towns. Harold personally supervised each project, teaching his technique to anyone who wanted to learn. The city created an official seismic-resistant sustainable housing program based on Harold's technique. He became the program's official consultant, working voluntarily. "Harold," said the mayor during the program's launch ceremony, "you have turned a natural tragedy into an opportunity for progress for our city." "Mr. Mayor, I just did what needed to be done." 1 year after the earthquake, Seaside had become a global reference in sustainable and seismic-resistant construction. Tourists came specifically to see the tire houses. Harold had become an involuntary celebrity. "Dad," said Jennifer during a visit, "do you realize you've changed the lives of hundreds of families? I realize that sometimes life puts us in the right place at the right time to do the right thing." And what if the earthquake hadn't happened? It would have happened sooner or later. Earthquakes are inevitable. Preparation is optional. Harold's house became municipal heritage, visited by thousands of students and professionals every year. He offers free tours, explaining every detail of the construction. The most important part, he always says at the end of the visits, wasn't the tires. It was the determination to keep going even when everyone said it was impossible. Mrs. Dorothy, who now lives in a tire house built under Harold's guidance, made definitive peace with her neighbor. "Harold, I owe you an eternal apology for all the bad things I said about your house. Mrs. Dorothy, you helped me when I fainted from working so hard. That's worth more than any words. But I doubted you. You doubted the construction, not me as a person. That's different." George remains Harold's best friend and technical partner. Together, they developed improvements to the original technique, creating versions adapted for different types of terrain and climate. "Harold, do you realize we invented a new way of building?" "We didn't invent it, George. We discovered it. Nature already knew that tires absorb impact. We just applied it to construction." "But you were the first to have that vision." "Margaret was the first. She's the one who kept that article about sustainable houses. I just followed the clues she left." Harold still lives in the same house, which is now surrounded by a beautiful garden cultivated over the years. He wakes up early, tends to the plants, receives visitors, teaches classes at the training center built next door. At night, he sits on the porch and watches the stars like he did on the first day. But now he's no longer alone. His house has become a meeting center for people interested in sustainability and innovation. "Margaret," he says every night to the sky, "thank you for showing me the way. Thank you for giving me golden hands. Thank you for not letting me give up." The tire house is no longer seen as an aberration. It is seen as an inspiration. Local school children take regular field trips to learn about sustainability and perseverance. "Mr. Harold," asked a 10-year-old girl during one such visit, "how did you know it was going to work?" "I didn't, my dear. But I knew that if I didn't try, I'd never find out. And what if it had gone wrong? Then I would have tried again, a different way." "How many times?" "As many times as it took." The girl thought for a moment. "So the secret is to never give up?" "The secret is to believe it's worth trying." Today, 5 years after the earthquake, Harold is recognized as a pioneer of sustainable, earthquake-resistant construction in the United States. Universities offer courses based on his technique. Governments of other countries consult his methods, but for him, the greatest recognition remains the reconciliation with Jennifer and the respect earned from the community where he has always lived. "Dad," Jennifer said on her last visit, "are you happy with everything you've achieved?" "Daughter, I am complete. I proved to myself that I was still capable of dreaming and achieving. I helped other people achieve their own dreams, and I have my daughter proud of me. What more could an old man want?" "You're not old, Dad. You're an inspiration." Harold smiles, hugs his daughter, and looks at his house. Every tire is still in place, strong and resilient, ready to absorb any impact life decides to send, just as he learned to do with life's impacts. At night, when everyone has left, Harold sits in his chair on the porch. The house breathes around him, a living organism made of discarded material and self-respect. He closed his eyes and smiled. "Margaret, we did it," he whispers to the stars. "Our dream house is standing, and it will continue to stand, resisting earthquakes, storms, and time, because it was built not just with tires and earth, but with determination, courage, and the certainty that sometimes the most impossible dreams are the only ones worth building." End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this inspiring story of overcoming adversity. Do you believe Harold made the right decision by persisting in his dream, even while facing so much opposition? Leave your comment about which part moved you the most and where you are following us from. Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to leave your like on this story that teaches us that determination can move mountains, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one.